I'd like to welcome you back to this episode of the Sisterhood Report. I am Kimberly Faith, your host. This is part 3 of the series called Age of Betrayal, and our guest Jessie continues the conversation with us. Welcome back, Jessie.
Thank you, Kim.
So I had I thought about a lot of things after we hung up the other day on our first interview. And as I mentioned to you by email, my mind was full of all kinds of things when I left here after interview 2. And I went home to discover that my 104-year-old mother-in-law had passed while I was in the interview with you. And we have been waiting for months about why she was hanging on. And I have become convinced that perhaps she either knew she was finally safe to go ahead and go, or else that she knew maybe the light was winning. Were you struck by that?
I was struck when you told me about that. That was very interesting timing, that she chose to go at that moment.
Yes. In fact, I was so overwhelmed actually from our conversation for doing episode, part 1 and part 2, that literally, like, I got in the car and found out the news and went home to that. I mean, there was no time to process, and my brain was spinning. And so I said, well, then let us continue the journey. So I want to thank you again for being with us. So before we continue, Jessie, I sent you the write-ups from the first part and the second part, and you mentioned to me that you were appreciative of the fact that it seemed to articulate why you were sharing your story. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. When I was reading that, one of the hardest things with my story is really getting people to even hear or listen. As a child, there were so many times I rebelled and, broke the code of silence in an effort to try to tell people what was happening in the darkness, what the individuals who, I was seeing commit these horrific abuses to others and, murders. I was trying to tell what these people were doing. And anyway, the majority of the time it was just shut off. There would be threats, that if I continued that there would be death to people that I loved who were close to me. Mm-hmm. And so, I grew up with this feeling like, I just carried everything in my heart, and there was nobody to tell, nobody to listen. As I mentioned in my in our last interview, I did have good people that I was surrounded by as well. We went to church, and I had, pastors that I was close to, or teachers who worked, Sunday school teachers who worked with kids. And at one point, one of those individuals I was really close to, and I had him call in the pastor and told them that I had something I needed to share with them. And the farthest I got was to say, I need you to know that my family is involved in the occult, and I want to tell you about that. And immediately I was shut down. I literally got a bold, Jessie, you need to stop lying and, tell the truth, and this is not stuff that we talk about. And I'm sitting here like, I haven't even got to tell you anything yet. So How do you know that I'm lying?
What's interesting, Jessie, what's interesting about that is I've heard the same thing from people who were intuitives that could hear angels speak, that when they were also a child trying to say, there's a message here, I need to share it with you, they were told the exact same words.
It is. Across the board, people respond the exact same way. And so, when I was reading what you had written, it was almost like this feeling of relief, of an assurance that, wow, okay, this woman that I just met, like, she gets it, she understands, at least at some level, she is hearing exactly what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. And I really appreciated that. And it did almost make me want to cry because, to hear somebody clarifying back to you what you're saying, there's something very powerful about that.
Mm. I could hear that through the email, and I want to thank you for trusting me enough to be able to put that letter and share a piece of yourself that you had not shared before. I know how difficult that subject is for you, and I was most gracious and hold it and honor it. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
The thing that struck me through our first two interviews was, and that's actually why I put in the title beside your name. I don't know if you noticed that, but I put down Love Warrior for Humanity, Chaplain.
Mm-hmm. I did notice that.
and I've considered myself often for a Love Warrior for Humanity, inspired by Glennon Doyle when she read her book. And that's what I saw, that you have taken great personal risk to break this code of silence, knowing that the price that may be paid. And I want to acknowledge that, because without people like you doing that, this cycle could still be continuing.
Yeah.
So what I was led, I told you I woke up in the middle of the night with a very clear direction. I would like this particular episode to be talking about what the plans were. So you were in this until, from what I understand, until your early 30s. Is that correct?
No,
okay,
actually,
help me.
I was in it from age 4.5 until 10, and I'm going to kind of clarify.
Okay.
It does go farther than that, but so my training was very specific up until age 10. By age 10, I was fully prepared and ready to step into that position if and when I was needed.
To step into the Mother of Darkness position.
Correct. And then at age 10, the Lord literally, there's no other way to explain it besides He provided a miracle. And I literally was able to completely walk away, like my family moved. And with that move, the Lord literally took me out of the hands of my relative, who was the Queen Mother of Darkness.
Wow.
And away from those family members, and put me under this hedge of protection, where they literally could not touch me. Now, with that said, so, I consider that was when I really got out. But with this group of people, you're never really out. They maybe let me explain the difference between, an average person who wants out. If they try to run or flee or hide, the Illuminati will seek them. They will send people after them to track them down, to hunt them. They will send, demonic oppression that is so severe that really there's only two options for people who want out. Because of those things, they either end up committing suicide because the oppression is so bad, or they end up murdered. And so, for me to literally just walk away and have neither of those things happen is a complete work of God.
Right.
However, they do, there were future plans. There were things that, as a child, rituals they had prepared that are end-time rituals. And so with that, I continued to receive contact from them. When I was 30 was when they sent out my official invitation telling me to get ready to take my position.
Oh, wow.
Then they continued, at age.
So that would be 20 years ago?
I'm currently turning 43.
Okay.
So that was just about 13 years ago. And then 5 years ago, we had kind of a series of events. We had one of the, I'll just call the original Mothers of Darkness who reigned during my time. Whenever one of them dies, we all know, we all find out about it. So so December 2016, we had one of the mothers died, and one of my cousin of mine actually took her position. And oddly, this Mother of Darkness was in a nursing home, and none of her family were there when she died. It was only my grandmother and this cousin of mine, and that was so that she could get her power and her demons when she died. And so I got notice of that, and then 2 days later I get this letter from my grandmother, again reminding me that my time is coming, I need to step up and take my position. And then 2 days after that, me and my family went, we're driving, we have to drive through a mountain pass to get to the local city to watch movies. So we decided to have a movie day with our oldest daughter, and at the time it was her fiance, but they've now gotten married. So as we were driving through this mountain pass, there's a mile marker there where several times I've broken vehicles down at this exact mile marker throughout the past 5 years. And so we hit that mile marker, and all of a sudden we hit a patch of black ice. Mm. And we literally it spun us and threw us in the air, and we hit the side of the mountain going 55 miles an hour. And kind of, we did walk out of that. I ended up having to have a shoulder surgery. But those type of things are very typical in what I grew up with. We consider those warning signs or things that they do. They'll allow evil to happen to make you do what they want you to do.
Wow. So I'm going to be much more courageous this time, Jamie. So I am, at this point in time, anybody that you want to name as we go forward that you think is important for our listeners to know. I don't want to put you at risk, but I know you were very sensitive to where I was the other day, and at this point, I'm like, the truth needs to come out. Because today is Thursday, April 9th, correct? Thursday, April 9th, correct. 2020. And I want to have this interview as kind of a documentation of that. So the Mothers of Darkness that have been reigning since that time, is there anybody important for us to know who that included?
These, let's just say, the real Mothers of Darkness are unknown. Their names are not common. They're not public figures. They're hidden in the system. They live very simple lives so that nobody knows or recognizes who they really are. You have individuals who are their public faces, and even some of those people, the majority of individuals would not recognize their names. So, that's well, except for Gloria Vanderbilt. So, okay. Gloria Vanderbilt was one of the grand high priestesses, and a lot of times she would be called the Mother of Darkness. You had Laurie Cabot Kent, who's still alive, and you have Joan Collins was one of those individuals. So those three were the primary three who often were seen as the public faces for the Mothers of Darkness. Okay. Yeah.
But there's still others that are infiltrating the rest of the system.
Yeah. And then you have individuals like Hillary Clinton. There's been a lot of rumors going around that she was a Mother of Darkness, but that was not true. The training and the special rituals she went through, she was a high priestess, but she was also the successor for Gloria Vanderbilt. So when Gloria died, Hillary technically should have taken her position and become the Grand High Priestess for the East Quadrant. Wow. Because of things that were going on politically, she did not, or was not allowed to. I don't know which of those is the true answer. But for whatever reason, Hillary was not able to step into her full succession. So that's kind of a mystery there.
But she's still an instrument of all of this that's the Illuminati that's going on.
She is, yes.
The plan.
So she is one of the individuals I mentioned yesterday who used to regularly have brunch with my grandmother and at our house, and yeah.
So what was that like? I mean, what was that like growing up with all the people that you had access to? I mean, things that you thought of as normal that the rest would be like, oh wow, you had lunch with them, and with no understanding of what it meant.
There was a lot of mixed emotions as a kid because I saw the good sides, and we had a lot of fun with these individuals when we were out, camping or on the sailboats, things like that. They really were very intriguing people. As a kid, I would sit there and have these amazing conversations with them, and I really knew that what I would say that public side of them came out very strongly, and they really did interact. They were very invested in their relationship with me, and so they would ask questions, wanted to know what was going on in my life, wanted to know what my future goals were, what things I was thinking about for future careers, and they would give their thoughts and opinions about those things, and in a way kind of guide and direct the ways that I was planning to go. And so you had this endearing side of these people that they were, like aunts and uncles, and very connected. And then you knew the other side, and the other side of them you never spoke of, you never shared. There were things so horrific that there just were no words for, even
Right.
if you wanted to share.
I mean, I was reading where you wrote that you as a young child witnessed as many as 1,000 deaths per month.
Yeah, yes.
1,000.
That was only from my proctor, so that was the Queen Mother of Darkness. That was just from her hands.
And approximately how many people would be even considered to be part of this Illuminati that could possibly be acting like this out? Are we talking a few hundred? Are we talking a few thousand?
Oh, no. In the upper hierarchy, even with just that, with, there's hundreds of thousands. They really have infiltrated every single part of society. I think we had talked a little bit of numbers just in the government alone. There's over 144,000 indictments.
Mm-hmm.
And all of those people have been found guilty of participating in these horrendous crimes. And, we see political people using words like the deep state, the cabal, to define this group of individuals. And it goes not just across our country, but nationwide. So,
and even globally.
What was that?
And even globally, right? I mean, so
yeah, that's what I was saying.
Okay.
Internationally.
Okay. What was the plan? I guess is what I was. As the more I've read, because I've read so much of what you've written, and you are a beautiful writer, and I know that became a way for you to process this. The plan, I mean, I was stunned at some of the things that I read. I mean, even down to the point that television ignites the alpha waves. And I mean, so could you just give somebody, if this had continued to reign out of control, like was the plan, what were they after?
Yeah, so with that question, we're really going to kind of dive a little bit into the Illuminati's, I guess we'll just call it their spiritual beliefs. As I had mentioned, they work directly underneath Satan, and so you really got to think back to the biblical times. The Bible tells us that Satan was cast out of heaven because of his pride. And it defines that even farther, that his pride was that he wanted to rise up and take the throne of God. But more than just take the throne of God, he wanted to be God. Mm-hmm. And so that is the core of this. Satan has not forgotten nor set aside that agenda, even though he was cast out of heaven. So on this earth, he has been formulating his plan on how he's going to usurp that throne. That includes pulling people, that he's gathered and created into this system who will make that plan happen. I know we haven't talked a lot about the different depths of the witchcraft, the divination that these individuals get into.
And I know you've written quite a bit about that, and I'm planning to put all of those links in there. So I don't want you to feel like you have to repeat all of those, because it is quite detailed. I mean, it is mind-blowing.
Yeah, it is. It is pretty detailed. So, so part of that is they, and even people might hear about some of these. It goes to some of these experiments that are going on. Through some of these government experiments, like, people might hear the names, Project Looking Glass, mm-hmm. or the Star Wars Project, Star Wars Now Project.
Or MK Ultra.
What was that?
Or MK Ultra.
Yep, MK Ultra, Montauk. All of those projects are developed to utilize people's spiritual gifts, and a lot of those projects have to do with opening the heavenly and the lower spiritual gates. Those are, I guess, access ways between earth and heaven. And so for years, Satan has been working to find individuals who can not only open those gates, but can hold them open. And then with that, he needs individuals who can host his general demons. The higher level demons, when they take over somebody's body, I guess that's the easiest way to put it in this story without going into too much. Mm-hmm. But when they take over somebody's body, it causes a lot of damage, a lot of breakdown. A lot of those people you will see lose their mental, cognitive sanity.
It finally, when I read that about what you wrote, it made me realize I've always wondered why so many stars, why so many musicians, why some of these people who seem to have everything, money, fame, all of that, were so into the drugs and alcohol because they were breaking down.
Yeah. And that has to do with the demonic possession. As they get into the higher levels, they gain more and more demonic spirits. So, basically the enemy is using these people as hosts for his spiritual army. And his goal then, once he gets, and it's not just like one little gate that he wants to open. At the moment, he's in the process of opening all of the ancient gates at one time and connecting them. So basically, there is no barrier between the earthly and the heavenly realm. And once that happens, he will use all the people who can funnel through physically those demonic spirits through the gate. And that's when he plans to attack and try to usurp the throne of God.
Okay.
So the individual who he's raising up to lead that army is the Antichrist.
And that's the battle we're in the middle of right now.
Yeah, part of the mothers, my generation, we were the last mothers of darkness. None of us last five received successors.
Oh, wow. I want to pause for a moment. That's pretty shocking.
Our whole job and purpose was to raise up the Antichrist. and to turn over the running of the system to him.
Oh, wow. Wow. Let that sit for just a minute. Okay, so I'm going to have us go into more detail there, but I want to pause for just a moment because some of my listeners might be thinking like I was 2 years ago that this stuff cannot possibly be true. So when I first ran across the MK Ultra program, and that is a mind control program driven by elements within the government, and it certainly goes broader than that, I was astounded at the research that I did, because that's what's shocking partly, is that all this information is really out there. I know it's constantly taken down by those who try to keep this hidden. But when I found out about it, I had a big question mark in my head and said, is this really true? When you have no frame of reference for this, you can't even begin to comprehend. Does that make sense, Jesse?
Yes, it does, yeah.
So I had this big question mark, and so, God and the universe has a way of answering your questions when you're walking around with a question mark hovering over your head. I go to a holistic place, and I'm going to have some things done. It was an infrared therapy session, and I saw a woman there that was actually I saw a woman there that was very questionable in her appearance and the color of her skin, and I remember thinking, what is that about? And somehow she and I ended up in the same infrared sauna together, because there were lots of people that day, and we had a conversation. And in that conversation, it was very brief, but she said something that I knew that she had been experimented with, and I acknowledged that I understand that those things happen. And she was like, yes, I'm so glad somebody believes me. I've been trying to tell people for years. And so we had a brief conversation, and of course, I'm still trying to, reconcile this. And she said how she was always followed, that these things were always known, that she could never be not kept track of. So I go home and I'm reconciling that, and I kid you not, less than 48 hours, a military helicopter was hovering over my house, and I knew very clear then that it was a warning.
That sounds exactly like my life, and I have individuals that I work with in our area, and when they joined on and started helping, with some of the anti-trafficking work, they really had no idea what to expect, and we would go to one of the local coffee shops. We kind of picked random restaurants, because I'm very aware that those things happen, that I do have people tracking me or always watching. So I'll pick, random places. I would switch up, which team members I was meeting with, so it would just seem like, I was meeting with random people. But I had, with one of them, we literally had pulled into the coffee shop, and we had a special phone call that we had to do that day, so we were, just going to sit in the parking lot and have our this special meeting on the phone. And as we're sitting there, 15 black SUVs pull in. 2 of them pulled up, one on each side of our vehicle, and the lady who was on my side got out of the black SUV, and she has her back to me the whole time. And all of a sudden, as she's standing there with her back to my car window, we see her arms go out to the side, and she's got her phone, and she starts clicking pictures of me and this other person in the car. Mm-hmm. And the other person, she was just like, my gosh, you were not kidding about these things. And I was like, No, I was not. Well, and another time, there was 4 of us, and we were meeting inside of a restaurant, and we had this, it looked like a family unit, like a mom and a dad and a couple kids. And they came in, they had their food, and they sat down right across from us. And then instead of, like normal people would just start eating their food and talking and spending time together, instead all of them, including the kids, turned our direction and just sat there and stared at us. Mm-hmm. And we were like, okay, this is weird. Let's take our meeting outside. So we go outside, and a completely different family. Only this family, like, they actually had hoodies with pentagrams on them.
Oh, my.
And they came and sat at the picnic table right next to us, and the same thing. They literally turned and sat there staring at us. And so these type of things, are things that...
I bring that up because these things do happen. And so I have very clearly done a great deal of protection around all of my work and all of my space and anyone who has helped me with this. So I have been given very clear direction that I am fully protected in this space. And that is part of what my purpose here is, to help bring this story to light. But I'm bringing it up because when people begin to understand the depths of the evil and the darkness that is with so many people that we actually trusted, I want them to understand how this was oppressed for so long. So not only did these kind of things happen to those who would try to bring light to it, I mean, that's why you begin to see reporters that have disappeared. That's why information that was gathered online, you see it all of a sudden be taken down. I mean, so even behind the scenes right now with this group, QAnon, that's trying to assist it, they've been battling this for the past 2.5 years. Is that just as soon as they bring all this data together, someone shuts it down, and I'm assuming it's the IT department that you told me of the Illuminati.
Yeah.
So can you please, if you had actually taken on that position and you were in this space now, I'm still reeling over the fact that you all were the last successors. What would be your job right now? Because what I don't think people understand is that we've actually been lulled to sleep about what was happening around us. So I was curious about something. I remember being tormented as a kid seeing the milk cartons that had only 1 or 2 missing children on the back of the milk carton. And every day I would be reminded, don't go out of the yard. You know how those kids are on the milk cart. And that was when I was a kid. And then I think about how the numbers kept growing of those pictures, and then how it's continued to grow. And it's almost like we were normalized to understand that missing children were a part of life.
Right.
Are those kinds of things part of the plan?
Yeah, that's part of how they gather the children. They have there's different people who do that. Part of my job as a mother would have so I'll share a little bit of a story, but the majority position of the mothers is, first and foremost, is you're there to serve Satan. You meet with him regularly every day, together or separate. Usually you have a together meeting in the morning with Satan, and then in the evening is when he visits each of them independently and gives them the agenda for whichever quadrant they're in charge of overseeing. These are mandatory meetings, so there's no getting out of it. You're there until he excuses you. So I was privy to that as a child. My proctor would drug my parents at dinner and my siblings, and so usually around 6:00 they would be so tired and knocked out, and they thought it was just because they were working so hard. They didn't realize that she was drugging them every single night, and and that gave her from 6 p.m. until 2 a.m. to train me. And so with that, hold on one sec. I kind of lost the story I was going with that, but my family... What
you would have been doing now at this point. So they were having meetings.
So part of what my family does is, on my grandfather's side, there's a lot of connection in one of the areas we were in was the Chicago area. There's a massive training center there. And
that explains a lot.
Kind of Midwestern area, a lot of the different Masonic lodges, Catholic churches, a lot of my relatives and family members run those specific buildings. And so with the lodges, you also have then the connection to the Frank Lloyd Wright houses. And Frank Lloyd Wright was an individual that it would have been, a couple great ago, but it was like my great great-grandfather. He was one of the 7 financial backers who not only helped build the city of Chicago, but he also financed Frank Lloyd Wright to build these homes. And a lot of those homes are considered, they've been classified as historical sites all across the United States. And in those homes, they have built in, I hate to use the word portals, but they have built-in spiritual gates where people can use those homes to get from one place to another supernaturally.
Oh, my.
They also use those homes because they're a historical site. They'll have groups of what looks like school kids coming for tours. So those homes really have become what we call auction houses.
Auction houses.
Especially during the summer, they'll have mass amounts of kids coming through in these groups that look like they've got a teacher and they're a class. Well, then they'll have a mother of darkness will be there, and, it looks just like a random little old lady, and, she'll walk past these lines of kids, and as she walks past, that she'll do something to signal whoever is the teacher or the handler of these kids, and so that person will start to pay attention, and she simply will either nod or she'll kind of, usually, I don't know how to put it, but she'll kind of do this little point with her index finger. If she nods her head, it tells them that she wants that child in the Monarch programming. So if she points her finger, it means that child's expendable. So in a matter of less than an hour, it could be hundreds of children whose fates are decided whether they're now in the Monarch programming or if they're going to be in the expendable programming.
You just made my heart stop, by the way. I mean,
go ahead.
You just described a Disney movie to me.
I did. Disney has declassified some of this stuff in very interesting ways people don't even pick up. So I'll give you another one, the current movie Moana. If you look at that movie, you have the grandmother who's considered the crone. Well, that is what the Queen Mother of Darkness is called. She's called the crone. On her back, she has a tattoo of a stingray. The stingray is the butterfly of the ocean. A lot of people don't know this, but what is the symbol for the Monarch or MK Ultra is a program within the overall training program, which is the Monarch program. So in Moana alone, you have the crone who has the symbol of the Monarch program on her back. In one scene, she's in the water and there's 4 other stingrays that are circling her, and that's representing, the Queen Mother of Darkness and the other 4 Mothers of Darkness. You also have in that movie, I forget what they call her, but it's the mountain that Moana kind of seeks out that's a woman. That would be considered the Mother Nature, Mother Earth. So that's the second Mother of Darkness. You kind of have 3 that are higher than the rest. So you have the Queen or the crone, the Mother, and the Maid. Okay, so that mountain lady represents the Mother. And then Moana in that movie represents the Maid. And in there's lines that are said like, you had the power within you all along. You are, we are the same. And it's really bringing out that Mother of Darkness belief system, and that they rule like you look at the end, who, Moana has the power over the water, over the land,
Okay. But
rules all those things. So.
But here's the thing: is that we do have the power within us, and those that are of the light. So how do you discern between? I mean, that's what I think is going to be the most difficult for people, is that when they find out that, the Mormons are a part of this, and they find out that some of these other things that they had faith in were part of this. How do you, in the next episode, we'll dive into this more in the next episode. So to my listeners, we're going to ask this question, but how do you discern, because what a lot of these belief systems that were pure, they were co-opted by Satan. Is that fair?
That is, yes. And for
They've
me,
stolen it.
what it comes down to two things, is that, who is the focus of the power? So that's a big deciding factor in that. Who's the focus of the power, and how is it being used?
Okay.
This system, is very self-focused, and it's all about raising themselves up, and to the extent of it doesn't matter what happens to others.
Okay.
They're
I
not
see the
focused
difference.
on raising other people up or investing in other people. It's all about self.
Well, and that's what I found is so interesting about much of this, is that it comes down truly on which syllable are you going to place the emphasis. It is that tiny. And
Right.
that small difference is everything. We're going to come back to that healing in the next part, but I would like to, at this point, for the rest of or at least our 10 minutes for this episode, is if this was allowed to go unchecked. So I'd like you just to kind of, as someone who's listening who has been completely clueless, how have we been lulled to sleep? It's been television, it's been the tech, it's been the movies, can you describe that? How have we missed it? How have these things lulled us into this acceptance that we were completely unaware? What was I want to wake people up, I guess is what I'm saying, Jesse. How did we miss it?
Yeah. It's really a complicated answer. There's a lot of things that they do to really set people up that, basically we've given away our sovereignty, our mental authority. People stopped really thinking through things. They stopped questioning.
Yes.
They started just accepting whatever answers were fed to them, and stopped doing the work, of really investigating things for themselves.
Being a good Catholic schoolgirl, children are to be seen and not heard. All of these things that we have been taught and trained to be small.
Or even just accept, people like to live this comfortable life. They don't want to have to struggle or strive to get the answers or to get the end result. They'd rather just, it's much more convenient to have things handed to them. So, like fast food restaurants, instead of coming home and making dinner every night, it's a lot easier just to go through a drive-through on your way to a meeting and pick up your meal and eat in the car, and save time. So I think part of it was really just, convenience and accepting that, the enemy kind of made things so convenient, so palatable, that people just went along with it.
This goes down to food.
Blindly accepted
food,
whatever
entertainment.
was handed to them.
Food, entertainment. Is tech a part of this? Is tech a part of this?
Yes. Some of that has to do with, through the tech systems, they do play with the frequencies. You have different frequencies cause different things. So some frequencies, I know, there's been a lot of research lately in the medical field how certain frequencies can bring healing.
Yes.
Certain frequencies can bring destruction. This goes back, the frequency thing is not just a tech thing. That really gets into some of the depths of the witchcraft and divination. These people have been doing, playing with frequencies for generations. And in the old days, we would recognize it more as the chanting, the humming, the sounds that they would make with things in nature. All of that, they found a way to really put that vibrational environment that they could create through sound and resonance into tech things.
All right, so let me clarify something, because those kind of things you just described can also be used for healing and for good.
Correct, they can.
Okay, so I think that's important for us all as we begin to try to figure out this new side on the other side of this, is that they used some of the healing modalities and some of the things that were available to us for evil, and we have the ability to use them for good, but we didn't know that we were gravitating towards some of these other things because we were unaware. Is that fair?
That is. Yeah, people, because they were unaware, it may have started with their grandparents, who chose not to get into, or, chose not to gain that knowledge or to engage in the community chantings or things like that. And, eventually people were desensitized where,
yes,
they're like, oh, that's just something, a culture in the Amazon does. Not our culture. We don't do that. We don't need that. And, looked at more being scientific-minded, more mathematical-minded.
We lost sight of the heart to be the barometer between the two.
Yeah.
So we went into this highly intellectual mind-brain thought process and thought that was going to take us. And because we started to tune out how we feel and our heart, we lost our ability to trust the internet, I-N-N-E-R, because we began to be desensitized to all of that. Would that be an appropriate way to pull it together?
Yeah, well, they basically split it up because in its essence, all of these spiritual things, they are mathematical, they are scientific. It's all one thing. And what they did was they split it into different compartments and said science is something of its own, math is something of its own, and then you've got the spiritual realm, and we can't, once you take out the mathematical proofs of the spiritual realm or the scientific proofs, then people started saying, well, we can't even prove the spiritual realm is real, and at that point, then they shut off their connections with it.
You just explained my entire life. You just explained my entire life, because truly, all this time, as I've been out there trying to teach people systems thinking, people are so fragmented into putting everything into a box, which comes in how we are taught in our schools, that we have a difficult time of synthesizing that these things, it's both and. We have been so compelled to be either or, and that's what I'm hearing was purposeful. So we never figured it out how it fit together.
Right, and they don't teach it in our schools or our programs. I remember, I was really challenged by a friend of mine. Probably the subject I least connected to was math, except for when it involved geometry, because that was a big part of my world. So I got in this conversation with a friend, and he said, math proves everything. And I was like, okay, really? Okay, if I'm in a conversation with somebody who does not believe the spiritual realm exists, how am I going to prove to them through math that the spiritual realm exists? And he's like, well, it's really easy. And I'm like, okay, I want to hear this. And he's like, well, you've got X, which is the physical world, and you've got Y, which is the spiritual world. He said, X plus Y equals XY. They're always together. And I'm like,
oh, wow.
Oh, my gosh. I'm like, that makes so much sense. I'm like, why don't they teach this in school? And I was like, okay, well, what about people who say that the spiritual world is just part of our imagination? And he said, well, put it into a triangle. He said, you've got X and Y and Z in this triangle. He said, the mere fact that you have all three in a triangle, he said, Z can only exist as long as y and x also exist. And I was like, how many years did I not understand math and the spiritual truth that can be proven through it? I was like, it's insane to think that math can prove the spirit realm exists. And that night, actually, as my mind was just overwhelmed with this. I kept seeing all of a sudden everything in math. And I called him back the next day, and I was like, not really, but I didn't feel this way really, but I was like, I hate you. I spent all night thinking of all these math equations, and I said, even if you look at life and death, it proves the afterlife. I said, you've got L, which is life, and D, which is death, and you always end up with living death. You never end up with zero, nothing.
Oh, wow.
I was like,
all right, we can go
so
lots
right
of
there
different...
you prove there's an afterlife. I'm like, this is crazy.
All right, we'll have to have a whole separate session about that one. So just as we're coming to a time limit here, and I want to be sensitive, I'm going to have us continue with our part 4. But the lesson that I'm taking out of all of this is, among many, but we have to own responsibility for the areas where we've been lulled to sleep. That it has been our lack of awareness that has actually laid fertile ground for some of this to come up, because we began to place our trust in things and people and institutions, organizations, and things that were not always in the best interest of us. And so the question becomes, why? Why did we place our trust in those things?
That's a great question. And, along with that, why did we choose to give away our power so that they could have all the power and knowledge?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's what it comes down to, is that we gave away our own personal sovereignty and power and subjected that to their will, where they made the decisions, they defined the narrative.
Okay. So, Jesse, we'll continue the conversation. To all of our listeners out here, the phrase I would like you to remember is, we finish up this particular episode, is sovereignty over self. More to come. Until next time.